Hello and welcome back to another Python tutorial. So in previous videos, we discussed how to use the Yelp Fusion API to go and request information from the Yelp server. While this API was great, it gave us back a bunch of information about different types of businesses. In some cases, we don't need every piece of information about a particular business. So maybe we're doing a query, for example, that we just need the phone number and the name. While the Yelp API will give that to us, we have to do a lot of parsing and then we have to make sure that we don't get the items that we want. And so it would be nice if we had some kind of mechanism or some kind of way where we could customize our request to say, hey, only return the information that I want to see. Well, lucky for us, Yelp has been developing a new beta platform that will allow us to make requests to their servers where we can customize them and they will only return the information that we specify. This will be using what we call the graph query language. Now, before I get kind of into the details about how this query language works, I do want to kind of be upfront in this video. We will only be talking more about the framework behind it, and we will go through some examples of taking pre-built queries and requesting those queries. So we will not be building the queries ourselves in this video, but we will simply be taking pre-built queries, requesting them, and seeing the information that is coming back. Now, in future videos, I will be showing you how to build the queries, but before we get to that point, we need to understand what they look like and kind of how they're structured. So this video is more laying out the structure, and then in a future video, we will discuss how to actually build those queries from scratch. So with that being said, I am going to go to the Yelp documentation. And so if you go to the Yelp Fusion developers documentation, so it's yelp.com developers, the dog ate our website. That's never great. Ah, okay, there we go. I don't know what happened there, but apparently it didn't like what I was doing. If it will let us go into it, looks like it. What? I've never had this happen. I think the website is down. No? Okay, there it goes. Perfect. That was really strange. I've never had that happen before. I guess maybe it went temporarily down or something like that. Anywho, once you get to the developer documentation, you'll notice here on the left pane, it's broken into different sections. So you got your general component, your Yelp Fusion. We're concerned with the GraphQL, the graph query language. And once we go to this page, they do give us an idea of how this query language works and basically what it's doing that's different from an API. And so I'll just read directly what they have here. The GraphQL is a query language for APIs. What does this mean for you? Unlike regular SOAP or REST APIs, GraphQL gives you the ultimate flexibility in being able to specify in your API request specifically what data you need and get back exactly that. So high level, we're going to make requests like we've done before, but now we're going to specify what we actually want sent back to us when it comes to the parameters. Instead of getting everything back, we can specify we only want, for example, the name and the phone number. As a query language, it provides you with a lot of flexibility that most normal APIs will not. Without needing to recreate endpoints, you can provide developers with the same functionality as a bulk endpoint. Your queries will be cleaner and easier to understand by combining multiple queries into a single request. So we'll also be able to see that we can query multiple businesses at once. So this is really cool, where if I have a list of businesses, I can request different information for each one of those businesses all in the same request. So very useful when it comes down to kind of going and getting bulk businesses. Now, they do tell us kind of what's the difference between, the GraphQL API and the regular API. Really, at this point, the regular API is more standard in the sense of what you're going to get back every single time. Where the GraphQL API, because you're customizing it, you might be getting back different information at different points. So in one query, you might be getting back the name and the phone number. But in a different query, you might have specified you only want the URL and the photos. So in that particular query, you would get back only the URL and the photos. So it's not as structured, or in the sense of it's not going to be as consistent as with the regular API. And then they kind of give us say, well, should I use the GraphQL over the regular API? Blah 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 blah. Um, they basically say, well, it's up to you and kind of what you're trying to do, which makes sense, really. And then they kind of give us a high level overview of what these queries look like. And really, we're going to see that they're basically like a JSON string. And with inside that JSON string, we defined a query. And then what is sent back to us is another JSON string with the information that we requested. While this is a great example with just a single component, like so a single query, they do give us multiple examples under the basic usage page. And so here, this is the one that I like looking at just because it kind of helps me identify, okay, how does this work and really what's going on. I like to say at the highest level, we've got an endpoint, and then there's arguments that are required for that endpoint. The first one is the name of that argument, and then the other one is the value for that argument. And so here I'm saying search a business. I'm going to provide an ID argument, and the value for that ID argument is going to be Yelp San Francisco. Once I've defined my query in a sense, now I need to specify the items that I want sent back to me. They're broken into different components. One is a scalar and one is an object. An object has scalars inside of it. So here I want the name sent back and the ID sent back. I also want the coordinates sent back. Well, the coordinates contain a latitude and a longitude. So that's a scalar with inside of our object. We can also request multiple businesses at once. We define our first query and our second query. Here, it's exactly the same. We're using the business endpoint. We're defining that argument, and then we're setting the value for that argument. But all we've done is we've just basically made two queries that are identical. It's just we've changed the business that we're looking for. They also show us a more complicated version, but they also say, if you're in the situation where you're making the same query over and over again with the same parameters, it makes sense to use something called fragments. Fragments provide you with the ability to refactor the query a little bit to not repeat the same fields over and over again, or to extract out commonly repeated fields. Without fragments, it would look like this, and then with fragments, it would look like this. So all we've done is we've taken our arguments, we've put them in something called a fragment. We've defined the name of that fragment. We define which endpoint, so we're saying on the business, and we've defined the arguments that we want sent back to us. And then all we do is we put that fragment within each query. That's all. So with this being said, I'm going to jump back into the Jupyter Notebook, and we're going to start going through the process of executing these queries. So the first thing that you do need to make sure is that you have to install a library, because by default, this library is not installed in Anaconda. It is called, well, I'll just put a little note up here. Just do pip install GQL. This is a graph query language client. So this will allow us to plug into the Yelp GraphQL and then execute request. Once you've done that, restart your kernel and then import your modules. So import your modules. The first one is going to be the GQL library. We're going to import the GQL module and the client module. The client is what we're going to be using to interface with the server, and then this is going to be our component to define our queries. And then we also have to import a couple other things. The next one is going to be GQL transport dot request, and then it's going to be import request HTTP transport. They make it sound way more complicated than it is. And then I also need to import my API key. I have my API key stored in a config Python file, so I'm just going to import the variable that I have in that. I'm going to run this just to make sure it ran correctly. Okay, good, no errors. This is simply going to be defining kind of like, it's basically the information that we're passing through in our request. It's things like the URL, the headers, and things like that. Okay. And then from here, we're going to define our authentication process. So our authentication process is where we're saying we're going to define our API key and the content type. So here, define our headers. And so what we're going to do is we're going to define a new parameter, call it headers. It's going to equal the first one. It's going to be a key called authorization. And then from here, that is just going to be equal to bearer. And then I'm going to format that string so that way it takes my API key. That's all. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is content type. This is basically saying what is the content type that I'm passing through. Most cases, it's going to be JSON string, so we'll just leave it like that. Technically, I didn't have to use this when I was actually using it without this parameter. So I was actually able to negate this parameter and it still worked fine, but I was reading documentation and they say, you should still specify it. So I specify it as just saying you should be expecting a JSON string. Okay, so now we're going to build the request framework. Okay, and so here we're going to define a new variable called transport. It's going to equal this little guy up here. We're going to grab this module. And then we're going to define some parameters. First one is the URL. The URL is just going to be the endpoint. And so, do I have it here? No, but I have it in this one. So I can just use this. Perfect. So that's our endpoint. We're going to define our headers. That's just going to equal our headers, or header object. And then we're going to define use JSON. So this is kind of like, up here we're saying specify that we're going to be using JSON. Okay, and we'll put that equal to true. And then from here, we can go and create the client. So create the client. So this is the part that is basically going to kind of go out and make our request. So create the client. So we're going to call it client. It's going to equal our client object. And then we're going to take and define our transport of our client. Well, that's pretty straightforward. That's just this. And then there's one other parameter, fetch schema from transport. I'm not entirely sure what this parameter does, but just intuitively looking at it, it looks like there is some kind of schema that Yelp would be using. And so it looks like the client's going to be leveraging that when we make our request. I tried looking at the documentation. I couldn't really find where this was. I mean, maybe I was just missing it. If somebody comes up with an answer to that, please put them down in the comments below because I am curious. Okay, so we've defined our transport. We defined our client. Let's actually go and make a query and then execute that query. So let's just define one of the most simple queries that we can do. So define a simple query where we're going to go request a business and then some parameters about that business. So we're going to create a new variable called query. That's going to equal our GQL object. And then we're going to build our query. Use triple quotes to make a multi-line query because otherwise it's going to be too hard to read. And I have some already pre-built queries I'm just going to be copying and pasting over here. We'll walk through it and kind of go through and see what it's doing. Okay, so from this one, what is this doing? We're using the business endpoint. We're using an ID argument. We're passing through that argument to say we want this particular business. And then we're getting all this information back. Once we've defined that query, what we're going to do is we'll print it out. So we'll say print the query. That will equal print. I'm going to do my little dashes times 100. And then from here, I'm going to print client.execute and then query. And then something I will do too, actually, let me see, response query. Let's just do this so that way we can explore it just a tiny bit more. Because people might look at this and like, well, what's being sent back, or things along that nature. So what we'll do first is we'll print the response query. And we'll see what we get. Okay, so we get back basically a JSON string. It looks like if I print this out, let's see what type it is. So we'll say response.query. So it's a dictionary object. So this is kind of the nice thing. It actually parsed it for us. So we now have a dictionary object. So that means you could start accessing the keys right away. And so what you'll notice is that we have a business We have a name, an ID, and basically all the parameters that we specified in this request. They did note on the documentation that if you use photos, you only get back one photo per business. This is different than the Yelp Fusion API. The Yelp Fusion API, they'll give you up to 3 photos back. So just keep that in mind. But other than that, this is almost identical to Yelp Fusion API. We've looked at this before, so it shouldn't look anything too unfamiliar. So what we'll do is we'll kind of show you next, like how would I access the information in this? Well, we know we want to go to the business, and then maybe I want I want the name. Yeah, we'll do the name. So this would give me back the name of that business. I still have the class type and I still have the raw results. Okay, so that's doing a simple query. Let's see one with nested parameters. How would that look? Well, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to say define response. I'm really just going to copy this. I mean, at this point, again, we'll see how to build a query in the next video. At this point, I just want you guys to kind of see what they look like and how they kind of operate, and then we can go on to the fun stuff. So I'm going to delete that. The next one is using a nested parameter. So if you look at this one, everything is identical, almost, really. Everything is literally identical. The only thing is I've just added this object, which is coordinates. And then I've specified the items I want back from that object. That's it. So it's literally identical, but if you want nested parameters, you've got to define the outer component, and then you have to define the inner components that you want. That's all. So if I run this one, we'll see that it brought back everything, including our coordinates, like we wanted. So that's using a nested component, so a nested parameters component. Now, there's still some other ones that we can do. What if we want to do multiple business queries at once? So this would be one where it's like, hey, I've got multiple businesses that I want to query at once. How would that look like? Well, what we'll do next is define a simple query. Well, this is really define a query for multiple businesses. And then we'll say here, no fragments. So this is kind of going to be that repetitive action. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to just paste over this. And so let's walk through this one. Again, for the most part, the same. The only thing that we really have to keep in mind is now we're defining each query individually. So this is kind of like business 1, business 2, the type of query, the argument, the value for that argument, and the items that we want back. So this isn't within its own little dictionary. This is within its own little dictionary, and then we have our outer dictionary that contains both of them. And so with this one, we should see 2 businesses coming back. Okay, so we have business 1 and then business 2. So the only thing I'm going to say here is now accessing it would be a little bit different. So that would be business 1 and that would be business 2. So that's the only little thing that's kind of different, which is instead of this one where we just have 1 coming back, this we have to kind of loop through and get each business. So just keep that in mind if you were to access it. Okay, so now that we've seen that one, let's kind of move on to the other component, which is, well, what if we wanted to use fragments, right? So maybe we want to use fragments in order to kind of simplify this query. How would it look then? Well, lucky for us, it's almost identical, right? So this is going to be defining a query with multiple businesses with fragments. And so here, I'm going to go down. I've already got it built from everybody. And so I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it. I do have it here, yes. Okay, perfect. Let's kind of just take a step back. This is, for the most part, the same, right? We've defined business 1, business 2. This is still all within that outer one, but now we're attaching this fragment component. We're naming that fragment, We're saying where it belongs. It belongs on our business. And then we're defining the items that we want back. So this is a great way to simplify our query. I don't got to repeat everything. I just got to type it once and then specify it in each one of the businesses that we want. And once we've done that, it's great. It's simple. So I'm going to execute that, and we'll see it gives us back everything identical. So it still works the same. So again, define the businesses that you want, specify the name of the fragment, and then just define your fragment. That's all. Okay, so with that one, we have one final example I'm going to show you, and that is using a different endpoint. So I'll go back to the documentation to show you this one. But if you actually go down, so there's some components here, making requests, rate limiting, localization, blah, 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 all that fun stuff, right? If you go to query, I believe it's query if I remember correctly. Yes. So here they talk about the different types of queries that we can do. Now I was showing you just the business query. So I was just showing the business query. There's other types of queries. And with these ones, it does tell you the arguments for each one of them. Let's say I wanted the reviews. I want to get the reviews for a particular business. How would that look? Well, at the top of every one of these types of queries, they have a general pattern, and then they have a sample query. They tell us the argument, the type that it's expecting, and then it tells us the fields that will be returned back to us. And then this cool little thing down here is we actually have a way where we can test it, and we can see what it will look like, and then what will happen once we request it. So pretty cool, actually. I think that's kind of neat. Now, ideally, people would say, well, how do I take this fragments component and, change it to where it works the same? It's pretty much identical. You're just going to be doing the same exact thing that you would be doing here. You would just be changing, the endpoint that you're using. You would be using reviews. I will be putting up code later, so that way people who are interested in kind of learning more about this, I'll have more examples to kind of show you what that would look like. But at this point, we'll just kind of explore what a different endpoint looks like. And then you'll see on the GitHub and stuff like that, that I do have other examples. So don't worry if it's still confusing. Take a look at some of my examples. Hopefully that kind of gets you up to speed with everything. But it's pretty much the same. It's just we're changing our endpoint, and then we're specifying the arguments that we want back from that particular endpoint. That's the only thing. This was the same, but that's just because for the reviews query, the argument is business. That's all. Okay, so let's print it and see what we get. Where did I put it? Did I put it somewhere else? Oh, I don't think I put it over here yet. My bad. Let's copy this. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to take this one. And then like that. Okay, so again, we're grabbing the reviews for this business. We want these items back. And we do have a nested object twice. In fact, we have a nested object within a nested object. So this is a good example to kind of see that nested component for us. Okay, so let's see what we get. Okay, so now we get back the reviews. And, oh, they still limit the text. Oh, that's a shame. Yelp does that with the reviews for some reason. They limit the text that you get back, and it drives me crazy. But you can see it's still working exactly the same. We're getting back everything. But here, all that's really different is, again, if we wanted to access it, we would just be kind of going through like this. And other than that, it's pretty much identical. So if you have any questions about kind of just getting started with the GraphQL, please put them down in the comments below, and I will try to get back to you. Also, if you could, please make sure to like the video. We always appreciate the support. And if you're not already, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so that way you get regular updates as we release new videos. Obviously, we're going to have another video with GraphQL where we're going to see how we can create functions that will basically construct our particular queries that we need to pass along. And then I'll probably go through just a couple more examples just so people feel comfortable, and they feel like they can kind of go out there, read the documentation, and kind of see what they would have to do in order to build the queries. So definitely more coming on this particular topic. So uh, stay tuned. Thanks again for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next video.